you are not allowed to call yourself a senior leader if you never had to manage at least one substantial crisis in your career. If you have like 7-figure OpEx run rate every month and no revenues left, that puts you into distress. I had to tell the team, guys, I don't know if we survive, right? Like, I have no clue if the company exists in 2 months.
Not a single person ran away.
Shock them with your honesty, right? When do you need your leader the most? When we hit our revenue numbers every month and smash records and increase salaries every 6 months and throw champagne parties? Or when the shit hit the fan?
Leadership is learned during days of thunder, not sunshine.
Sunshine is such a dangerous period because people get distracted so easily. When you have periods of burnout, and everybody has them, right? I don't believe burnout comes from hard work, can be induced by it, but comes always from emotional stress. The only place where you find more hypocrisy than in iGaming is Hollywood, right? And they're paid for it.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, founder of the iGaming Leader Mastermind. And on this show, I sit down with some of the most inspirational and forward-thinking leaders in our industry, diving into the real challenges, high-stakes decisions, lessons that shape our industry. If you're a VP, director, or an executive in iGaming, this podcast is built for you. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsor, SumSub, the full-cycle verification platform trusted by top iGaming operators worldwide. SumSub helps onboard players quickly, stay compliant, and prevent fraud, all without slowing growth. More information in the description.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. I am here with Austrian software engineer turned entrepreneur and CEO who started building his own company at 26. Started in aerospace, moved to Microsoft, and then got poached by what later became his mentor, co-founded the business, then moved over to another business to become a CEO, to turn that around, and then founded his own AI-led business. Welcome to the podcast, Andy. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Andy, I wanted to start at the HappyBet story and what exit really means. You was a Playtech-funded business doing 20 million in revenue. You reached break-even in December 2019 after 3 years of grinding. 90 days later, COVID hit and killed the entire retail business. You lost 100% of your revenue overnight. Tell me a little bit more about that kind of external hit and what that does to you as somebody running the business and how you dealt with it.
I mean, that was a very, very interesting period of my life, as you can imagine. I remember, I think in January, we had a little party to celebrate cash break even after retail business because we were basically a retail business. Digital was still in its infancy. We had a website. It was really crap. So we were actually a retail platform with equity and franchise shops across Germany and Austria. And it was quite a ride. So we built it up for 3.5 years. And then we reached a point where we became like the number 3 in the market and number 4 in the market quickly, something that nobody has done before. And then we reached a point where we said, okay, retail itself, at least the German part, is basically cash break even. So we had a celebration in January. And then I think it was the 13th of March 2020, we basically shut down the entire world. And all your revenues are gone because not only sports was gone, but as you know, governments had other priorities than keeping retail betting shops alive. So we were basically down to zero, like literally, which was quite interesting because if you have like a 7-figure OpEx run rate every month and no revenues left, that puts you a bit into distress. It was hard because, of course, it was built the business from scratch. We started with 3 people and then 3.5 years later, it was like 180 or something. And out of the sudden, you don't know if the company will survive, if you have to fire basically everyone, if you have to go in liquidation, if you get sold because, you know, it was a Playtech funded business back then. So it's like corporate CV. Luckily, we basically keep quite a calm head because the one thing we've done in February before the whole thing happened was we got some fresh money. It was actually meant for acquisitions because we also grew inorganically. So I acquired 6 companies and integrated them during these 3.5 years to just boost the growth, right? Because as soon as you have corporate investor, there is only one direction, is up, right? There is no bootstrapping or something. Luckily, we had that cash. Luckily, we made a few really quick decisions, things like calling all of our sponsorship partners, telling them, guys, we have to postpone the payments because at the end of the day, you can choose to enforce it and we're dead and you get nothing, or we have a chance that we can pay in a few months. Luckily, all of them agreed. And that was something that we have done very early. Our competitors didn't do that quickly. So they suffered, of course. And yeah, I had to tell the team, guys, I don't know if we survive, right? Like, I have no clue. The company exists in 2 months. But yeah, roll up our sleeves and cut the costs, control what we can control, right? Crisis management. First things first, go to the whiteboard and write down 2 columns. What can I control? What can I not control, right? We can control our costs. We can control our roadmaps. We cannot control when we can reopen, right? This is an external shock. At the early days of COVID, we did not know. Nobody knew if this is like a 2-week thing or if this is like a 2-year thing, right? I had a good friend who runs a hospital. I called him 2 or 3 days after we had the lockdown, and he basically told me, no, it's not as dangerous. The problem is just we're not prepared for it. And it's just so contagious that the mass of patients and the mass of sick people is just overwhelming the systems. And that's the main issue, and not that this will wipe out like 10% of the population. Is not going to happen, which was good news. So I knew that if we survive 3, 4, 5 months, we would probably have a good chance to make it, because the disease itself is not as lethal as it was cooked in the beginning. So that was quite an early observation and bet on that. And according to that, we just handled, right? We stretched out our cash flows. We said, okay, let's try to survive 6 months. Luckily, there was also a lot of support from Playtech. We have to really give the guys kudos here. And the entire team stuck together. Not a single person quit or left. Probably one of the proudest moments I had. But yeah, these 6 months were absolutely mad. Yeah.
I've heard you say a few times, it's kind of control the controllables. We call it spheres of control. I think that's really important, especially in crisis management, thinking about, okay, what are the things that we can do? And it works really well especially when the emotions are high, right? When there's things that affect people, or, let's say redundancies or turnaround in businesses. I first wanted to dive in what you said there, the last bit, which is it was one of your proudest moments that not a single person ran away. Why is that, you think?
Of course, I knew it's a lot of uncertainty for everyone. Like every company got hit by it, right? But I also knew that, we were a startup. Even though we had like some corporate VC money, we didn't pay massive salaries. So it was, for most people, it was like, this 24/7 startup grind. It's our baby, it's our business, right? Especially, those listeners having a bit of exposure to retail know that you have a bit of a different bond to your organization, to your company, than in a digital business, right? Where everything is like 0 and 1. Like you have something physical, like you have shop stuff, you meet your customers, right? So automatically, like every individual contributor has a bit of a more intense bond to the startup because it's their baby and they can literally touch it. But I was also clear that people have to pay the bills, right? And people have to feed their families. So at the end of the day, of course, I was nervous to lose some of the core people because I was always planning for success. So meaning that I knew that, again, from a cash flow perspective, we'll probably make it if the assumption holds that we can reopen in a couple of months. But what then, right? Like if half of the core team left, then you basically run an empty shell and crash against the wall afterwards. So this was basically a concern. I think at the end of the day, what I learned is leadership is a profession that only, I would say, gets forged and manifests itself during a crisis. I have this very hard opinion that you are not allowed to call yourself a senior leader if you never had to manage at least one substantial crisis in your career. No matter if you were successful or not, this is less about did I turn things around successfully. It's more about roll up your sleeves, right? Keep the team together and not just call your 5 headhunter buddies and update your LinkedIn profile, right? So I think that was probably the biggest learning period I had. I would not want to miss this experience, and especially the outcome. Company survived, it then got sold, and then the team stuck together. And I think the key was simply what I now call Andy bombs, which I still drop, which is basically some harsh truths, just put them on the table, like randomly sometimes, right? In the middle of a meeting, or not in a, let's say, dick way, right? But my mentor, Armin Sageder, always told me, shock them with your honesty, right? This is something that I try to live by also in my personal life, right? It's like you work with smart people, like you work with engineers, you work with people with degrees, you work with people who grind for you 7 days a week, who are really invested in your business, right? As I said, it's their baby. They can literally touch it. They are genuinely interested, so they would anyway know what's going on and will find out. Maybe it takes a bit longer, but don't fool them. Just tell them the truth, right? And I think that was the key here, right? Like I told them every day, like I told them how the cash looked like, how much money we have, what the runway was, how we could potentially create a bit of revenues, what we can actually do day by day, because people were still here, right? And people still had jobs. So what job do you give them? What tasks do you give them? Like every day when the shops are closed, right? Which is also psychologically extremely important, right? Just don't sit at home for 6 months or 3 months or whatever, right? So we did a lot of cleanup work. We actually used the chance to do a lot of research. We called our customers because they all had customer IDs, right? We worked on the product and so on and so forth. So people got a bit distracted and felt like, okay, the company is going forward, right? So they know there is enough cash and they know there is the backing and they know that we don't drop the pen for like 3 months or 4 months and do nothing and sit tight on our asses and assess, right? This doesn't happen. So I think this helped a lot. And yeah, I was inspired by Armin's words, right?
You said something before as well, which said leadership is learned during days of thunder, not sunshine. And I love that. Kind of goes into exactly what you just said earlier.
When do you need your leader the most, right? When we hit our revenue numbers every month and smash records and increase salaries every 6 months and for champagne parties, or when the shit hit the fan, right? Like everybody can be a sunshine leader. It's like what I saw at Microsoft. Like I really learned to sell them, but you learn nothing about leadership because it's only up, up, up. I remember our worst year was like 98% revenue attainment, our budget attainment with a 24% annual growth of a company that was 30 something years old, right? Or 40 years old, and 80% contribution margin. So this is a problem, right? And people got fired because of that. So you don't want to be mean here, right? So no offense, but you don't learn leadership there, right? You just don't learn. You learn how to sell and how to chase KPIs and just quarter by quarter by quarter and grind. Yes, good. You need to learn this as well. But leadership, I think, is a skill that I only learned when I hit the first real substantial crisis, which in this case was the near death of HappyBet during COVID. Yeah.
Not just leadership gets kind of taught in that crisis, but also leaders stand up and the non-leaders break it. It's a perfect scenario to see who's actually a leader. So not only does it get taught in that situation, it shows you who is and who isn't a leader. And the second thing is that I also believe that that's where innovation happens, right? You have to be creative. You have to find new solutions to a new problem that you hadn't forecasted. And you said something before about finding mentors or finding advisors around you. Basically, you just got to find people who failed recently. And like, that's such a great take because that's where it all gets taught, right? So when you think about the industry now, and, you have the tax hike in the UK, challenges in the Netherlands or whatever, we have all these challenges everywhere in terms of scrutiny, in terms of numbers hitting the bottom line. Do you feel that that's also where leadership gets shown and innovation happens for the future?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like at the end of the day, we even call it creativity when it comes to innovation. Like I listened to a very, very famous designer, and he said that he never asked for more money, or he was actually asked, why didn't you ask? You could work for everyone, for Apple, for Nike, etc. Why don't you ask for more? And he said, because this is exactly the point. Creativity and innovation means that you come up with something within very tight boundaries and not with something when you have endless resources and can just throw money out of the window and can hire whatever talent you want, right? I agree. I think it's the same. It's a good metaphor, actually, or analogy here, right? Like if you have some constraints, if, the shit hits the fan, excuse my French, and you have to wake up and you have to become creative. Easier said than done, 100%. Like if you're a UK operator and now face like a mid-size or smaller operator, right? Not Entain or Flutter, like the small guys. I mean, that's tough cooking now, right? Like this is for sure tough boardroom discussions. But at the end of the day, those who make it will probably be, as cheesy as it sounds, way better afterwards. And the tighter the constraints, the more innovative, or let's call it creative, you need to become, right? And yeah, I had to do the same like 15 times in my life, and it always worked out, let's say, afterwards way better than before. Yeah, can happen that you die, okay, but then maybe your business is anyway not meant to be sustainable, right? I mean, if you're 100% dependent on one market and an external or severe external shock, be it the COVID, be it the tax hike, whatever, can wipe you out. I would ask a few questions as a board member anyways, right? So, I mean, assuming that these are not startups, of course, if you start up, you focus on one thing and do it well. And then, but if you're an established company, right, which we have plenty of them in this industry as well.
But I love the theory of constraints. But how do you use that now? Do you use that at all? Of course, I don't know exactly what the situation is in your business, profitability wise and stuff, but how do you, like in days of sunshine, do you use this theory of constraints as well? Do you apply that principle?
We always have I mean, in both businesses, no matter if it's autonomous mines and then also back when we had substantial crisis at BetGames and then like really, really strong years. I mean, BetGames is a very thriving company, very profitable, which is a very hard thing to do for a small mid-scale live dealer business, because live dealer is all about scale, right? Like this is why you have Evolution and Pragmatic, that they have the scale and the innovation. But in Prag's case, they're just execution champions and they have scale, right? So I always run any business on a sustainability criteria. And of course, when you work in the AI space and like we do there, have a lot of VC money, you have pressure to grow, right? But I can tell you that we still look at every single pound we spend 3 times, right? And we kill things immediately. We measure everything to the dot, right? Which is the beauty if you build something from scratch in AI, right? That you can measure a lot of things. And we keep a very tight corset around things, right? So even when we hire people, right? Like it's very, very, very rare that we just say, okay, we have now 20 additional contracts. We need 5 new people. No, we just believe that the more rigor your operational constraints are, the better for the business. It's a different story if you work for like a larger organization, of course, and a corporate, right? But still at BetGames, I remember when we had record years, 50% growth in 2024, 45% growth last year. This year also looks like another 30-something% growth for like 15, 16-year-old company. Not too bad for a live dealer, right? And very, very profitable. There is no, let's pump up salaries every 6 months or let's hire more people. I can tell you that BetGames headcount is now stable, but from the record years, 24, 25, I think at the beginning of 24, we had like 20 or 30 more people in the back office. I mean, the studio obviously grows, but when we only talk about back office, we had like 20 or 30 more people than we have now, right? So the headcount is flat or actually in some cases declining, because we innovate, because whenever somebody leaves or when we make a strategic decision, we forced everyone to challenge processes and structures, always, right? And remember last year, like we're in 2025, like AI is everywhere. Why do we create banners by hand? Like it's nonsense. It's completely idiotic, right? And I think that is a key success criterion nowadays. It's probably different in 5 years ago, right? Before the age of AI and the age of automation. But yeah, 100%, like keep the constraints up, and not that keep the constraints up, you can lift them or broaden them. You have to, because if you grow at some point, you need to invest. And I'm not saying do not invest. We just invest in very different areas, right? And spend a lot of money on technology, like shitloads of money on technology. So there's a shift from labor budgets to technology budgets coming along, but it still doesn't mean that you go crazy because you had a record year and spend your profits immediately on pumping up salaries artificially, or just hire another 20 people and find something to do with them. Like, there's nothing easier than hire another 3 development teams. And I promise you, hire 3 additional development teams in an iGaming company, they will be super busy and they will be there at 100% capacity. And your roadmaps will still shift and will still be shit, right, in terms of your deliveries. Always happened. So that's why I'm a strong believer. Be careful during the days of sunshine. It's a bit the opposite. So it's a bit counter-cyclical when there is a crisis. So remember, we invested quite a lot actually when, for example, at BetGames, when we had like 22, 23, the crisis years, we basically scratched the entire roadmap and built entire product lines from scratch. And as you can assume for a live dealer, that means not only OpEx and getting new developers in or different developers in, but also a lot of multi-million CapEx environments because you need to physically build studios, etc. Money that wasn't really there back then. So I think it's like this, this textbook, be a bit more aggressive when you have the team and the technology, but you are in a crisis. So you know that if you have the backing and you have the runway, right, the cash flows, then invest. And then during days of sunshine, well, be careful, right?
It feels counterintuitive maybe to some people, but that makes a lot of sense because that it's kind of like you were saying about that COVID time. If you're first mover to actually do something about it, like a crisis, similarly, right? An external crisis, when the macro turns and the macro environment is different, that usually hits a large portion of companies. And so when you're able to aggressively invest because you've got the runway, because you've been, applying a theory of constraints while the sun was shining, that makes you the first mover, and that allows you to survive in an environment like that.
I've seen it a lot also in this industry is if you go too aggressive. So again, I'm not advocating for hit the brakes when times are good, like go aggressive after works, right? And double, triple, quadruple down, of course, right? 100%. But the big mistake I've seen, even France, there's two large companies in Austria that raised one raised 400 million from a US VC, right? And I remember one of their co-founders is a friend of mine. We went to uni together and he said, I have no fucking clue how to spend this money. Like literally, it's good to have it, but we have no clue how to spend this money. They forced me to hire 1,000 engineers now. Like the core product is somewhat stable now and works, but now I have to tenfold my team and find jobs for them. And that company almost went bust a few years later because they overhired. And it's not because they hired too many people, but because they got completely distracted, right? Like, as I said, there's nothing easier than, okay, you have a few million extra cash flow. Let's hire more and more and more developers and do X and Y and Z. You lose track because somebody needs to manage it. Somebody needs to validate it. So that's the core message. So sunshine, yes, double down, triple down on what works. Use some money to experiment because you need to innovate. Okay. Like we also in BetGames, we established 2 years ago, I established an incubation team, right? It's like a handful of people who just play around with AI and build avatar studios and stuff like this. But it doesn't mean that we now go crazy and say we double the headcount and go all in on X, Y, and Z. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because it killed the core business. And it was the right decision to be done, yeah.
And I think the other thing is any sort of investment during days of sunshine is that it's never just the cash investment, right? Whatever it is, into people, into technology, it's the time investment that actually kills it, right? Because when people are no longer under that theory of constraints, they make these kind of lazy decisions on the technology of the people that thinking it's going to fix the thing instantly. But it always comes with a management debt, right? With costs and a cost of time. And I think often that's where these things get killed. But I wanted to talk a little bit about BetGame and how you entered there, because you, with HappyBet, of course, right, you're in a very challenging situation with COVID hitting and then having to turn that business around. Nobody leaving. You're, like you said, proud as farmers. Very entrepreneurial startup kind of vibe, right? Everybody's in there. You're sharing runway and cash flow and everything, right? But then you come into a very different environment. Tell the story a little bit about how you came in and what you found. That's where I'd love to start.
Yeah, I mean, once the decision was taken to basically sell HappyBet to SNAI in 2020, which was, I think, the right thing to do at this point, just from a synergy perspective. I was just executing the business myself because I don't want to work for corporate, period. I cannot work for somebody else, right? Don't like to have a boss, which is, I think, very telling, but it is what it is. And then I just got a call it was completely unplanned, from the main shareholder and investor in a company called BetGames. And he called me and said, look, I heard you. I knew him, and He said, okay, I heard you're free now and I have this little personal investment in a company I love very much. But, as an industry back then, Live Dealer was growing 20% plus a year and a company is shrinking by 3%. This is impossible, right? And can you jump on a plane and take a look for me? Because I need a new CEO and I would like to have your opinion. So put up Google Maps and just had to see where Lithuania was, right? I knew it was one of the Baltics, but it's like, is it the top one or the bottom one? So it was the bottom one. So I flew to Lithuania. It was still COVID times. It was summer 2020, but the first time, I think late summer 2020, when I said, okay, I'll take a look. And looked at the company, saw technology, great people, right? But bit of a management issue there. So not in a negative way, but like this classic example where you have like a founding team and was still running the business like in 2012 when they built it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. BetGames is still run in a very, very, very hands-on entrepreneurial way. Like you have to imagine a 600 people company. There's only two hierarchy layers. There's the C-level and then there's a team lead layer, nothing else, right? So it's really run in a very lean way. So this was not the problem. The problem was more like ignoring what's going on the market fundamentally, right? So I called him back and said, look, I think this company has a lot of potential, but you have to probably change two massive things. First of all, probably half of the management needs to go and be downsized, because I think when I arrived, the exec team, the C-level team was like 9 or 10 people, right? In such a small company. And just historically grown, right? Because the founders were just super nice people. And it's like, okay, we need a CMO, right? The chief marketing officer. Who likes marketing, right? And then some girl raised her hand and said, yeah, I like marketing. Okay, chief marketing officer, right? Like one of these, I would say, romantic stories that works early days, of course, when you build something up, right? But the company had reached a size in a distribution and also a size of customers, tier ones, that had different demands, right? And the market was moving really fast. Like evolution was already a machine back then, like 2019 when Prague really started to take off, right? 2019, 2020, 2021, right? And out of the sudden you have new left and right that were always there, but they were just ignored for 5 years, right? Because we're so special and we only do special content and niche content, and we don't need to compete with Evo and Games Global and Playtech and so on and so forth. The reality hit differently. So came there, toughest year, I think, of my life. I think I told you about HappyBet a lot, but from a personal perspective and from a leadership perspective, this was for sure the toughest thing I've ever done, because you have to imagine you come there as a foreigner. Half of your management team is like 20 years older than you, does not speak a word English. So I always had to use a translator, right, with many of these people. And there is a complete reluctancy to change anything. And not to change anything, to recognize that maybe looking left and right and doing some of the boring things to just get the company back on a growth track and then innovate, right? Like, you always move between exploitation and exploration, right? When you look at strategies. And the company needed some urgent exploitation, right? With some like no-brainer products that we should have done. And that was a pretty tough fight. So I remember it was like a lot of shouting matches, but via email, because we couldn't talk to each other a lot. Then a few decisions were made from a product perspective that I didn't back, but founder decided to do them, and it almost killed the company. Multi-million investments into sports products, etc., that completely crashed against the wall commercially. Very well executed. That's what I meant before. So the company had great capabilities, strong execution, but just did the wrong things, right? So they delivered a fantastic product, but at the end of the day, the player decides, and the player decided, I'll try it, but I won't come back, right? So that almost killed the company. And then after 18 months, we were finally at the point where I also had enough board backing to fundamentally overhaul the company. That was then the easy part. Like changing these things were emotionally hard, but like from an execution perspective, pretty straightforward because I knew what to do, right? And yeah, we replaced basically the entire management team with the exception of the CFO. Everybody else had to leave, and brought in a lot of quite experienced international people within a year. And then we scratched the roadmap and said, okay, we're not doing this old stuff anymore. There is no point in this because, even the TAM for that kind of product was already way too small. It was like, I thought it was like 250 million euros in GGR a year that particular niche probably could produce. And BetGames was already doing like back then 150 million or something. You cannot grow this market, right? Because you saw slots, RNG games, fast-paced games were on the rise back then already, right? And they still are, right? So long story short, scratched everything, rebuilt the product from scratch. So you have to imagine the company was back then like 12 years old or 11 years old and didn't have a single roulette table in the portfolio, right? A live dealer product, right? When we know that the roulette category is like 50% of the global live dealer GGR still, right? So we basically produced all these products because I knew, okay, we're live with like 1,500 brands globally. So we have good distribution. Just the product doesn't work in 9 out of 10 markets that we're targeting. So we built like tons and tons and tons of games, launched them, got into the crash vertical. I flew around the world to talk to all the customers and said, look, guys, you're our best customers. Do me a favor. The company is, and as again, brutal honesty, company is dying. Help me understand our player profile type. Luckily, we had these great relationships in the company, which was again due to strong team that the company had. Like from that perspective, everybody loved games. Like even if you go out there and ask about BetGames and its people, I think it's one of the most beloved company out there. There is not many people, like at least from the top 20 customers we have, that says it's a rubbish company or they are greedy or they're increasing prices like every 6 months, like the big boys do. I think we never increased prices in 6 years or 7 years. But yeah, they gave us a lot of insight. And then we started to say, okay, we only have an overlap with Evolution players of 20% or less, right? So other live dealers, given the product portfolio, are not the immediate product, right? But crash games and slots are eating our lunch. So we went into the crash space very successfully with a product that is now the number 2 in our core markets, number 2 and number 3. It depends on volumes, but on which metrics you look at. So that alone basically almost doubled the company's revenues. And then we added all the casino portfolio, brought on new customers, signed large deals with game show deals with the likes of Entain, etc. And then, company since then is thriving, but it was basically, I wouldn't even say a turnaround. It was basically a rebuild.
That's one of the things, isn't it, Andy? Especially with founding teams or founders and entrepreneurs in general, we're all built to find problems, identify problems. We're really good at finding them and then fixing them, right? And so I think one of the things that the curse of entrepreneurship is that you constantly have these shiny objects and you constantly see opportunities everywhere, right? And you see revenue opportunities everywhere and you know you can make money. But the problem is that when you do that, you're so thinly spread that the market doesn't know you for any single thing because you're doing everything. And you're like that investment of time that we were talking about earlier, which you can only spend once, is now gone on many different things. And it sounds like that was the case with Sportsbook there in terms of development. It's like another vertical. It's a distraction to the business. And ultimately, successful businesses just do one thing and do them really, really well. It's not true everywhere, but I think that's where, especially with leading successful small businesses to mid-sized to then large, is really that thing.
Successful small businesses, right? So distraction is deadly for smaller organizations. If you are a large organization like Evolution, etc., of course, you need to be in every niche somehow. And I think they have done probably the right thing, similarly to Playtech, by just acquiring a lot of stuff rather than building it themselves. But for a small organization, this is not possible. So you should actually know what are the top 2-3 opportunities you can actually not only work on, but you can deliver them to satisfy your customers' needs and the players' needs at the end of the day in a proper quality. I remember when one of the largest operators in the world offered us to completely replace back then Azuki's roulette environment, and that alone would have more than doubled the business for us. Just produce a few roulette tables for them. They offered us exclusivity, global exclusivity. That was in the first year, in this very tough first year. And I immediately said yes, of course, because I did a quick calculation, said, yeah, okay, just do this. It's not sexy, but again, it recovers the business. It basically gives us the cash flows that allow us to go from exploitation to exploration again, and then build, because it's privately held and still a privately held, completely debt-free business, right? Still today, BetGames does not have a single cent of debt. So it's very sustainably run out of own cash flows. And I said, okay, let's do this, right? And presented it to the board. It was the time when I was not the board member yet. And everybody was like, yeah, of course, like no brainer. What do you even discuss? Like just completely do it, like amazing, because the spillover effects to other operators, etc. I mean, it's amazing, right? Like, how do you get such a chance? Well done, boy, right? Good. And then I remember the founding team stepping in and saying, no fucking way. We're leaving immediately. We're dropping the pen if you do this to our company. We're not producing roulette. We're unique. We're niche. We do nothing else than our weird games, and put the bet slip on it. And that was one of the harshest discussions I ever had, I think, in my career. But at the end of the day, we didn't do it and did the other thing, the sports product, and that of thriving. And yeah, we almost died. But yeah, everything happens for a reason.
It's one of these key things, right? Where focus and just do more of the boring stuff and do it really well. That's where the money is for most businesses. So
I'm big advocate for a lack of innovation in this industry. I think there's zero innovation in this industry. But at the end of the day, you need to understand what pays the bills, right? If you want to do anything successfully in any business, in any vertical, as an established company, you need to protect your baseline cash flows, right? The stuff that actually pays the bills, unless you are 90 days from bankruptcy and you need to do crazy stunts and do weird thing. Yeah, of course. But that's what a lot of people often forget. And that's what I'm saying. Sunshine is such a dangerous period because people get distracted so easily. Money is thrown at them. They increase the OpEx run rate, which is very, very hard to decrease, right? Like there was this period in the last 5 years. I mean, look at engineering salaries, like how engineering salaries like skyrocketed, double, triple over the last 5, 6, 7 years, right? In some cases, well deserved, but at the end of the day, you will not get rid of these costs quickly. You can fire people, but good luck with slashing salaries, right? In some cases, you can't even do it because it's just prohibited, right? Especially in Europe. So, long story short, be careful, right? Like, it's just very simple. Understand what pays the bills, and then anything extra pays for your luxuries, right? Like it's like in personal life. If you want to buy a Rolex, well, don't buy it from your salary, buy it from your maybe interest income, right? Like this is your play money and do whatever you want with it, but ensure that you have enough left to pay your mortgage and feed your family and fill your fridge and maybe do a nice vacation per year, and not drop it on stupid things. And I think this is the same thing in business. It's like common sense.
I want to talk about the last little bit, Andy, with the current business. So tell me a little bit about how that started, because you started that while still in the previous business. And a lot of guys and girls I speak to, of course, they have their kind of side projects or they have their side ventures, but that's not all too common. You started that business while you were still CEO, right?
It was actually in late 2024 when we started out, right? The whole thing, I mean, Autonomous Minds is now a fundamentally different company to where it was or how it started in 2024 from a product perspective. So the idea basically came up out of frustration, like as so often, right? Like the whole analytics space is one of the most absurd fields in any business, right? Like your data costs go up and you hire more and more analysts and scientists and whatever fancy job titles you give them. But for whatever reason, you still wait a week to 10 days to get any ad hoc question answered, right? Like answered, not just another dashboard, like an actual answer. So I wanted to fix this. And that was like the early days of agents. So AI was already a thing, but agents end of 2024 was like the new thing that you read in some like articles maybe. And I read a lot of these articles because it's just a leftover from my times when I did my PhD, right? You always read like this scientific journals and newsletters and see a lot of stuff before it hits the market. So I looked at this, called a good friend. He back then led R&D business of a San Diego-based company, and asked him if he can produce a prototype for me just to ensure that I get my numbers, right? Like within my numbers, my answers to the basic business, mainly numbers, within a minute without me having to raise a BI ticket, right? And he did, and it worked out pretty well. So we decided and we showed it around, right? And a lot of people said, oh, wow, I have the exact same problem. Can I have this? Can I test this? So we said, okay, called him again and said, quit your job. Let's build a business together and not build one product for one company. And that's how it basically started. Then we pivoted a few times, and now the company is doing quite well already. Just closed another massive multi-million funding round, and is now a completely different product, because what actually the business does now is building an agent-first Palantir, right? So basically, when you look at the data infrastructure of the last 30 years, right, it's all built by humans, for humans, and for very technical humans, like even Databricks and all the hard businesses. They're great products, but an agent, and there will be soon more agents deployed in companies than there will be humans, right, has a completely different requirement on data flows and underlying of architecture, right? That's why all these agents, you have your agents, and we all play around with it because we're tech-savvy people, but I don't know many examples where a particular agent or a handful of agents got deployed across tens of thousands of employees in an organization, and they're capable of running autonomously, right? That's why the company is called Autonomous Minds for Agents, right? And one of the key reasons, not the only reason, but one of the key reasons is because what goes in and what comes out of an agent is usually different, especially what goes into what the human can absorb, right? You can absorb fuzzy data and so on and so forth. But an agent needs to have precise information, right? And a lot of different information in different formats to what a human needs. So long story short, that's basically what the company is building now. On top of the analytics stuff, or underneath the analytics stuff, is actually an entire data platform that consumes all your data in your organization, right? Doesn't matter if structured or unstructured, transforms it, cleans it, labels it, and then builds ontologies and semantic layers on top of it to be able to feed that into agents. So our actually consumer is not a human. Our consumer is an agent. And whatever that agent does for the human, we don't really care. What all that company cares about is how can any agent get real-time insights about whatever happens in your organization, and then do something with that data, and ideally autonomously. So that's basically the long story.
I think everybody also recognizes that specific issue, right? You want to have some sort of report on some sort of bits of data. You create a ticket, it takes forever, and then you get something back that's, it's like difficult to interpret. And so I see the real business case for it. It makes a lot of sense. I was listening to your podcast with Robin, Diary of an iGaming CEO, which I love. I love Robin, great guy. One of the things you said at the end of that podcast was, well, a lot of hypocrisy in the industry. And you were talking about how, it's really important to have like an advisor at Greece, or some sort of, someone next to you, someone that a mentor, whatever it is, but somebody that has also failed, right? So tell me a little bit more about why you feel that that's important, not just to have somebody there or to have a group of people there, but also why it's somebody that's to step away from that hypocrisy, what you mean with that, and why it's so important to focus on that failure.
I mean, hypocrisy, yeah, I was half joking. Actually, I'm not joking at all. I really have a strong opinion that the only place where you find more hypocrisy than in iGaming is Hollywood, right? And they're paid for it. Is really quite an interesting place here. Look, why is it important to step away from it? Why is it important to have people that, what I say, have done it and also failed, right? Like, I think one of the success factors I had in my life is when I built HappyBet, I had Armin as a mentor. He was the founder of PaySafeCard. Then he took that money, invested it all into BGT, Best Gaming Technology. At the age of 40, he was bankrupt, basically, and I made the turnaround. So he knows how to walk the valley of tears, right? At BetGames, the entire business is owned by entrepreneurs, all of them, every single investor is an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur now. Some of them, 2 of them billionaires, right? But all of them failed multiple times and went through really tough periods in their life. And I think this is quite a huge success criteria for me personally, because as I said, when does leadership matter? When the shit hit the fan. And being a CEO or a founder or whatever, right, is a very lonely job, right? So the best thing that you can have is to have some trusted advisors, no matter what they are, if they're investors or not, doesn't matter, right? Who've been in your shoes and who you can call and say, look, I have no clue how to handle this, right? Without being anxious about, oh my God, how can, what will they think if I say I don't know the answer, right? Or I need advice, or I'm really burned out or whatever, right? So I always had that through all my entrepreneurial journey. And I think this is the best advice I can give somebody who wants to start a business, to surround yourself with these people, right? We got a lot of offers from X, Google, X, Microsoft, whatever, VPs, EVPs to be our startup advisors when we started building autonomous mines, and when the news basically spilled that we raised a lot of money and so on and so forth. But we always rejected that not because they're bad people, but as I said before, they know nothing about leadership. They have not built businesses themselves. They have not fought against bankruptcy, maybe even personal bankruptcy, right? Like I had 2 times in my life where I lost all my money, right? And luckily turned it around quite successfully multiple times. But you want people who have been in your shoes. And again, even if they weren't successful, it is still better advice, also from a mental perspective, when you have periods of burnout, and everybody has them, right? Not because of hard work. I don't believe burnout comes from hard work, can be induced by it, but comes always from emotional stress, in my opinion, right? Like, and emotional stress results when your founder is your baby. You're in not only with your time, you have an accountability for people, you're in with your cash, right? Like, this is really important. So you better find people who can actually really hold your hand when you need it because they have been there, rather than giving you some textbook answers or some idiotic corporate advice on how to restructure cash flows and bullshit, right? So this is why I think it's so important to have people around you that also failed, right?
I think that's a brilliant piece of advice to land on. Annie, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Leo. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the iGaming Leader podcast. If you're a VP, a director, founder, or an executive in iGaming, making the biggest decisions alone, that's exactly what I've built iGaming Leader Mastermind for. Small inner circles of vetted senior executives, weekly hot seats, and accountability from people who understand the effects of the decisions that you need to make. Find out more and apply at igamingleader.com. And a final thanks to our sponsor, SumSub, the full cycle verification platform for iGaming operators. Player onboarding, AML, fraud prevention, all in one place. More at sumsub.com/gambling. See you next week.